Thank you. They do a fantastic job. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our commencement speaker. The Federal Reserve makes some of the most important public decisions in our nation. Few institutions have a more profound influence on the U.S. economy and indeed global welfare. So it is a great honor to introduce Mary Daly, President and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. As a member of the Federal Open Market Committee, she helps set U.S. monetary policy, and she is at the forefront of the Fed's mandate to encourage price stability and full employment. And as a president of a regional Federal Reserve Bank, she's obviously an expert in assessing economic data. But she is much more than a brilliant economist. President Daly actively promotes economic progress that works for all Americans. She advocates for what she calls 3D public service. It calls on public servants to be, in her words, fully human, vulnerable, compassionate, optimistic, and pragmatic. As I've noted already, our challenges today are complex. 3D public service holds that we can better solve them if we have the courage to exhibit our full selves, including our vulnerabilities and shortcomings, of which we all know I have many. So, I think that qualifies as great and humble wisdom for a commencement ceremony. Please welcome San Francisco Fed CEO and President, Mary Daly.
Hello, everyone. It is a great pleasure to be here. And Dean Goldman, I couldn't thank you more for the kind introduction. These are my favorite times, honestly, to come and see all the promise before us. So first things first, I would like all the graduates, and I mean this, only the graduates, to give yourselves a big round of applause. Come on, guys. You have earned this day. You have earned it. And it is really important today and in the coming days that you reflect on that and you recognize the accomplishment you've made. But of course, it's also important to acknowledge the family, friends, faculty, and everyone else who has helped in ways big and small make this day possible. So I will say on behalf of the graduates and myself, thank you to all the people who supported the graduates we see before us. So this day is especially important and meaningful for me because I also graduated from a public policy school, the Maxwell School at Syracuse University. And while the colors of our gowns are very different, I did wear red-bottom shoes for you guys. We are bound, we are really bound by a shared commitment to mission-minded work and public service. Now, of course, when people hear public service, they often think about the President of the United States or the DMV. But we all know in this room that the label is far bigger than that. And in fact, it's not a label at all. It's a choice. Now, I first learned about this choice decades ago in Baldwin, Missouri. A high school guidance counselor made a phone call. She asked her friend Betsy to meet with a former student, a young teenager who had done well in school, read a lot, loved to learn. But the family finances and the family itself had fallen on hard times. And the teenager, needing to help out, had dropped out of school. She was working different part-time jobs, driving a donut truck, stocking shelves at Target, mowing lawns, whatever she could find. And her goal was to one day be a bus driver so she could have stable benefits, or good benefits, and a stable income. And Betsy agreed to meet her. Right away, she could see that the young woman had a plan. But Betsy also knew that for the plan to work, the young woman would need a GED. So she suggested it, and the girl took her advice. Then Betsy told her she would have even more opportunities if she went to college, at least for a little while. So the young woman applied, and she got in. But she couldn't afford the tuition. So Betsy wrote a check, and we still had checks back then, but she wrote a check to the bursar at the University of Missouri, St. Louis. And at that very moment, everything changed. A semester of college turned into a BA from the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and eventually into a PhD at Syracuse University in economics and public policy. Thank you. And that path led me here. That young woman, me. Thank you, you're so kind. I went from a teenager hoping to be a bus driver to president and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. And the reason was Betsy. Now, this is the important part. Betsy wasn't a public servant in the traditional sense, and she certainly didn't see herself that way. But that's exactly what she was. That's exactly who she was. And it was not because of a job or a title. It was because of her lens on the world, how she saw things. Betsy could see beyond what was right in front of her. In front of her was a teenage dropout struggling to make ends meet. Betsy saw a young woman full of promise who had simply fallen on hard times. And her seeing changed my life. And it is the reason I'm before you today. That, graduates, is service. But seeing a person right in front of you is one thing, an important thing, but one thing. Seeing millions whose names and faces you will never know is quite another. Every step you take up the career ladder puts you a little farther away from the people you serve. And that distance makes it easy to lose sight of what really matters. Now, it took a highly charged moment to bring this point home for me. And it was one of the most meaningful moments in my 30-plus year career. It came in 2009, in the wake of the global financial crisis. I was part of the San Francisco Fed research team, and we were briefing the bank's then president, Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary now, of course. So colleagues were describing the ongoing challenges in the labor market. Near double-digit unemployment, a lack of job growth, a dismal recovery in place, a dismal forecast. And Janet asked a simple question: what would the impact be? And the answer was almost immediate, reflexive. The labor market will eventually come back. But eventually was beside the point, and Janet instinctively reacted. She struck the table, I mean, it was a pound, with her fist, and she said, "These are people." Except there was a bleep before people. Now, in the Midwest, we would say friggin'. But let me just say that Janet Yellen is not from the Midwest. But both the expletive and the fist pounding, they were startling. And for a moment, everyone in the room fell silent. Janet had just laid bare the truth about our work. It was not simply theoretical. Behind our data, our models, our forecast, lived people, individuals who had lost jobs, homes, and sometimes hope. And we had missed it. So the moment passed, and we turned to the briefing. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. and I have never forgotten it. As a Reserve Bank president, I have tens of millions of constituents, and it's not enough to look at the data and think I know them. Real knowing comes from seeing the who behind the statistics and how our policy decisions affect their everyday lives. That is what Janet Yellen's pound of her fist really meant. It was a call for all of us to see. Now, this practice of seeing, done day after day, changes not just what we think, but also what we do. A vivid example of this came early in my research career. We were studying the impact of environmental programs. And one of the study sites was a village that had a tree planting program to prevent soil erosion and offer shade. And we had gone to check on it. And when we arrived at the village, the results of the program were painfully clear. Every single tree was dead. It was a sea of perfectly planted, completely lifeless sticks in the ground. And the program workers were devastated. But it was obvious what had happened. The trees hadn't gotten enough water, and they died. So we went to speak to the villagers, and we learned that it was a 2-mile walk to the well and back, a trip they made already multiple times a day to get water for cooking, drinking, and bathing. And when we heard that, we understood. Of course the trees had died. We had provided hard-to-care-for trees to people with limited access to water. It was a tragic but classic policy miss, providing a well-intentioned solution without ever speaking to the recipients and seeing what they need. And this is why seeing is so important. When we don't see things clearly, we don't do things well, no matter how good our intentions. And we end up with a sea of dead sticks. So I share these 3 stories with you as you embark on your adventures, because to me, and I think to all of us, they capture a powerful truth. When we see things clearly, we do things differently. We develop programs that give people what they actually need. We acknowledge and understand that real-life struggles that numbers don't show. And we write the check for a struggling teenager that changes the course of her life. So as you go out into the world, remember this: public service is not a job. It's a choice. It's a choice to see people clearly and to act on what you see. And if you make this choice, no matter where your career takes you, a courtroom, a classroom, a boardroom, or the situation room, you will be a public servant. Graduates, that is my call to you. Congratulations, class of 2023, and welcome to the fold. Thank you.